If you have come to my channel as a subscriber, you've probably found it via this viral video of a triggerfish attacking me in Darwin on Negros Island in the Philippines. And why did the fish attack me? Well, I was near her nest. So this happened in the Philippines, but on Negros. So I just came back from an amazing expedition to Tubbataha, and there were lots of triggerfish. And here, so this is in Tubbataha, there are two of them, and they're chasing each other. So these fish are just inherently aggressive, and they would also fight each other, particularly when they are nesting. So let's look at more triggerfish here. Now, you don't have to panic. Actually, you should never panic underwater. You don't have to be afraid if you see a triggerfish in any case. So this one here, this is also a Titan triggerfish, is not near its nest. So it is feeding, and there is a little bit of coral rubber. In the most healthy reef, there will always be some rubber. And this triggerfish is digging up the rubber and is looking for invertebrates, probably crabs or clams underneath. And interestingly, there is a Moorish idol nearby. And the Moorish idol, of course, is a much smaller fish, and it's hanging out with the triggerfish, and it's hoping to get seconds. So the disturbance of the bottom, which the triggerfish is causing here, this will unlodge smaller invertebrates, or maybe small fish, which the Zanclus cornutus, the Moorish idol, is trying to catch. And the triggerfish are typically very persistent. They are digging, for quite a while. It's not a one-off. There seems to be a plan. So these are clearly intelligent animals, and this one thought that there would be something here, so it invested quite a bit of time into digging. Now, there's another such case, again in Tubbataha. So in Tubbataha we have these steep walls, and then there's a slope on the reef top, and this is on that slope. And again we have a Titan triggerfish, and you see a little sandy area here. And the triggerfish is also digging around. And again, it has a few hanger-ons. So there is a grouper here, and I believe there was another small wrasse. And so these associations between different fish species which forage or which hunt together, this is something you see quite frequently in Tubbataha, and the reason is that you have a very high density of fishes, and these are not scared out of their minds by humans, by fishing, by spear fishermen. So you see much more fish behavior in Tubbataha than in many other places, because essentially the fish are relaxed enough to do the more complex behaviors. So this triggerfish here was more at this point was more browsing along the reef slope than digging in one particular spot, but you get the idea how the feeding looks like. So this is a yellow-lined triggerfish, and it uses a trick. It blows into this rubber sand mixture, and again there's a wrasse looking if there's a second. So look at this action of the triggerfish trying to unlodge food. Now, besides the Titan triggerfish, we saw a lot of yellow margin triggerfish, which are very similar in size, even though they're typically not as aggressive, breed in Tubbataha. And they would also have these craters in the sand or in the rubber, and then they would guard these. So I would often just put a camera trap there and film them, and you can see that very often they are actually couples, the male and the female, guarding these nests. And these would be not very happy if you came close, but they would not chase away a diver like the Titan triggerfish would do. So even though this is a fairly similar species, fairly similar size, the level of aggression is quite a bit less. And these were essentially breathing in these little breeding colonies. So these craters were not on their own. There would be a crater every 4 or 5 meters, in the areas of the reef top which were appropriate for the breeding of that fish. So very interesting to observe, and then again putting a GoPro in the sand and then just moving away a couple of meters turned out really well. Now, what is a great attraction for me as somebody interested in fish behavior in Tubbataha are these oceanic triggerfish. So this is a species which I have only seen in two places, and once near an open ocean oceanic buoy about a kilometer off the big island of Hawaii and in Tubbataha reefs in the Philippines. Now, Tubbataha is very much just one reef and two atolls in the middle of the Sulu Sea. So these oceanic fish, they come to Tubbataha to breed. And we're always doing our fish service at the end of the diving season, so typically in June, and then there's a lot of this breeding going on. So again, I would put the GoPro next to these nests and I would see how these oceanic triggerfish are guarding their nests. So you can see from the body shape of this fish that this is a more elongated fish, and the fins are bigger and more powerful, and the oceanic triggerfish is typically a midwater fish, and so I believe in most cases it only comes to these reefs to breed. And these nests here, they typically are made in the coral rubber, and it looks a little bit like anchor damage. And I've actually seen people post online, look, I went to Tubbataha, it's supposed to be so well protected, and there's this whole spot of the reef which is broken. But in reality the fish broke this. This is not human damage, this is not an environmental destruction, this is a nest of a triggerfish. And they are also almost as big as the Titan triggerfish, but just like the yellow margin triggerfish, they do not fight off divers. So to film what I filmed here, I used this method where I had the camera just next to the nest, or I would very carefully approach. And this is again a type of breeding where you don't just have a single nest, but in an area which is appropriate. And this is also typically on the upper part of the ledge or on the reef top. In this area where it's appropriate for these to build a nest, you would have a nest every couple of meters in many places. I've seen them on the South Atoll on Tubbataha, and particularly on Jesse Beasley Reef, which is this smaller reef which is also part of the Tubbataha National Park. And what a treat. So here this fish is hovering above the nest. While it's not chasing away humans, it's definitely chasing away other fish. And it seems to know very well which other fish are really dangerous. So here we have a angelfish checking out the camera, and there are a lot of smaller damselfish. The oceanic triggerfish really seems to have pretty good knowledge who would be willing to eat his or her eggs, and it chases away this, so that there are these small wrestlers all around the nest, and it doesn't even bother with them. So very sophisticated behavior. Here we have another view. You can see in some of the situations the visibility wasn't very good, but this is essentially, it's nature, it's not Disneyland. And you can see the nest again is in a mixed sand rubble area, and there is actually, if you look in front of the nest, there's a shrimp goby. It's some Ambly Eliotus Steinitz, I believe, with a shrimp. And here again we have a view from above, so these nests are probably 2 by 2 meters, and this is pretty unique fish behavior which you can see only in Tubbataha. So I hope you enjoyed today's video, and let's jump back in next week for more Tubbataha fish footage. See you then.